Yesterday we spoke about this idea of going into the land of Israel, the idea of having to treat warfare according to the Torah is very different from warfare according to other societies. Again, I'm not knocking. I'm not saying for the other societies that there are problems. Today, in the generations that we live in, there is definitely more formal morality inside of warfare than there used to be. I think on the field, on the war, in the battle itself, I don't think any of this really makes any difference. People just behave the way they'll behave. But all of that was really just an introduction into the land of Israel. What God is going to do now is He's going to define the borders of the land of Israel. Right. So before we get going, if you take a look, there's a map over here, and you'll see that there are two different lines running through this map. One is a kind of a grey line, and the other one is a grey dotted line. And as the footnote over here explains that they are going according to two different approaches as to how big or how far the land of Israel stretched, which means that if you work it out, you'll probably see, because the solid line bulges out at one point, I think that the total kilometrage is probably the same in both of them. Right, the dotted line is a little thinner and a little higher, right, and the other line is a little fatter and a little lower. So I think that if you're talking about square miles worth of country, it's probably going to be the same thing. The question is, where exactly do they go to? There is a book which I was going to bring in today. I once heard a cute line. What's his name? Reuven Atkinson once said he was doing a whole bunch of different speeches, and he says that he gets up and he says, the last thing that I must do today is to forget my speech. Yeah. As I left the house, the last thing I must do is forget my speech. He says, and sure enough, the last thing I did when I left the house was forget my speech. So I was going to bring this book in. I thought to myself, the last thing I must do today is forget to bring this book in. And of course, the last thing I did before I left was forget to bring the book. It's a book in Hebrew called Dat Mikra, and it follows all the different, not just over here, in fact, going from the beginning of the Tanakh, it follows all the different opinions as to where things might have been and what's being referred to, because you know that biblically, the names that are spoken about are not necessarily the same names that we have today. Normally there's some kind of a geographic connection, of course. So if you talk about certain places, so they're pretty much around that area. Whether it's exactly that area or not, very often it's not. Right? So somebody did a lot of research, and they brought out this sefer. It's a very, well researched. It's well documented. Brings all the different opinions. Over here, they've just brought two opinions about the borders of the land of Israel. There are other opinions as well. But the idea over here is to teach us how much of this area belongs to the land of Israel proper and how much of it is not. Now, we've spoken about this in the past. The 2.5 tribes that ended up on the other side of the Jordan River were, ultimately, when the Mashiach comes, he should come very soon, but ultimately when the Mashiach comes, that land will be incorporated into the land of Israel. Which means we've got the land of Israel proper, which is what appears over here on the map, whether it's following the dotted line or whether it's following the solid line. But we've also got an extension to the land of Israel, which will be included in Mitzvah Hashem when the Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes.
Today, what is that Reuven and Gad?
Jordan. Not the whole of Jordan. The part of Jordan that's attached to the border of the land of Israel. And there are, my mother and my brother once took a trip to Jordan. They went to see Petra, amongst other things, which apparently is supposed to be something extraordinary. Has anybody been there? Petra? Supposed to be something absolutely extraordinary, but they also got taken to the place where they think is Aaron HaKohen's burial place, which is on the mountains that look out onto the land of Israel. The land of Israel is a land imbued with Kedusha, with holiness. What we spoke about yesterday, when God gave a command that you've got to get rid of all the idol-worshipping, apparatus that exists inside of the land of Israel. So you need to know where the land of Israel is in order to be able to do that. So here, the various borders are being laid down in order for us to be able to understand what is considered to be the land of Israel proper and what's not. If you pay attention to the map, you'll see, interestingly enough, that the borders of the state of Israel are a little shorter than the borders of the land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel, right? Because Mount Hermon, I don't know if you've been up there, but that's the most northernmost part of Israel. It borders onto the Lebanese border, and onto the Syrian border. I'm sorry. It's the highest point in Israel.
You go skiing.
You can go skiing there, but I recommend only when there's snow. Otherwise, I'm not convinced that it's probably worth going to ski there. But they do. This last winter we just had was an appalling ski season. We had hardly any snow and hardly any rain at all, unfortunately. But there have been years when there's been huge amounts of snow that have fallen over there, and the skiing is supposed to be very good. But that's the end of the state of Israel. Yeah. That's the border, right? Mount Hermon. If you look at the map that's here on the side, you'll see that it goes out much further up. Right, and it's going up into Lebanon, and you see the Lebanese mountains. According to one opinion, that's where it comes to an end, and according to another opinion, it goes up even further, and it goes up to Har Chor, right up on the top over there, which means that Emir Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, the borders of the state of Israel are going to expand, not just because extra land is being added in from the bottom, but also land that's going to be added in from the top as well, which is going to belong to the biblical land of Israel. Right now it does not belong to us. It should happen soon. Let's have a look at chapter number 34. Vayidab Hashem Moshe lemot Tzaves b'nei Yisrael v'amata lehem ki atem ba'im el ha'aretz Canaan zois ha'aretz asher tipol lachem b'nachla eretz Canaan legvuloiseh. So I just want to repeat what we said last week, because I think it's a very beautiful idea. I really do, that the two tribes of Reuven and Gad who came to Moshe, and they said they wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan because the other side of the Jordan was very fertile, and it was great pasture land for their flocks, and they had an awful lot of flocks and cattle. When they went into the land of Israel itself, they saw that they'd made a mistake. That the land of Israel, even though there was less of it, the quality of the land of Israel was something which was completely extraordinary, something fantastic, and they were sorry that they decided to make that decision, that they would have preferred to have gone in and received less rather than stay on the other side and received more. If you take a look at at a satellite map of the area around here, what you'll see is that Israel itself is not a very fertile place, the land of Israel. And if you go up north, so you go into Lebanon, go into Syria, you'll see from the satellite photos, you'll see it's very green, very lush. Move down south into Egypt, and of course you've got the Nile Delta, and you've got the Nile flooding its banks, and even though they get as little rain as we get over here, nevertheless they rely on the Nile, and they don't have to rely on the rain itself, and it's very fertile down there as well. The only place that is not naturally fertile is the land of Israel, stuck in the middle over here. The reason for that is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, wants us to earn the fertility of the land. He wants the land to produce, but he wants the land to produce because of our spiritual input, and not just because it's got all kinds of natural commodities that are going to make it a wonderful place to be in. If you look around, there are countries all over the place that have been blessed with all kinds of things. They've been blessed with oil, they've been blessed with gold, they've been blessed with diamonds. If you come from Canada, they've been blessed with maple syrup. All kinds of very important commodities that the world requires. And here in the land of Israel, up until very recently, the only real commodity that exists over here was falafel balls. And now, if you take a look at the commodity market, as far as I'm aware, there is no market for falafel balls. Maybe you could start one. You could corner the market. Short. What is it? Short and long, and corner the market, and whatever. You could do all kinds of things, right? We have trucks of falafel balls turning up over here in the yeshiva because they've been bought by you on the international markets. But why is that? It's not because the land of Israel doesn't have the potential to produce, but rather the land of Israel is only going to produce when the Jewish people are producing spiritually, which is we've got to put in our effort, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will put in his effort, and between the two of us, it's going to turn into something very special. That's why the land of Israel is fascinating. If you read eyewitness accounts of what the land of Israel looked like in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, it was a very desolate place. Explorers came through, people like Mark Twain and all different other kinds of people as well. They came through and they found a very, very desolate, desert-like place. There were a few urban centers like Jerusalem and like Tiberias and like Tzfat. There wasn't very much else over here. It was very, very quiet. Life was very difficult over here, right? When did the land of Israel begin to turn into into something which was producing and beginning to be fertile? Was really at the beginning of the 1900s. Right, what was called the Aliyah, when they came, waves of Aliyah came in, people started coming, and they started settling. They established kibbutzim, they established, all kinds of things. Vineyards were established. The Rothschilds set up all different kinds of places which were hoping that they would turn into, agricultural settlements that would become self-sufficient, so that people would be able to live and to work on the land. And all of a sudden, the land of Israel started to produce. Hadn't done anything for the last 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple. And then as the Jews started coming, re-establishing themselves, making their various little settlements, whether they were kibbutzim, whether they were moshavim, whatever they were, all of a sudden they started working hard on the land, and the land started to produce. Today, the land of Israel, the state of Israel, is truly an astonishing place. It really is. I mean, if you see what's been done in the last 66 years, from the nascent beginnings of the state of Israel, what's been established since then is something that defies any kind of logical, any kind of rational explanation. David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the state of Israel, whose dream was to turn the Negev into some kind of a green oasis, right? Today he would be very happy with what's going on. Israel, of course, were at the forefront of drip irrigation, right? Understanding that water is a very scarce commodity over here. To use it properly, if you use your water properly, you need a lot less. That was the whole idea of drip irrigation, of dripping water into very specific locations, was a way of making the earth produce in a way that it wouldn't produce if it was being watered in a more general fashion. Solar power, of course, the land of Israel. Take a look at the buildings. Most buildings have got solar panels in order to produce free hot water. It's the most incredible thing. It really is. But how's that phrase go? Something is the mother of all inventions. What is it? Necessity. Necessity is the mother of all inventions. I think over here in Israel that really is proved. With the idea of everything that's been put down, everything that's been brought into the world through Israeli creationship. Something it's truly extraordinary. Where is this coming from? It's coming from the fact that the Jewish people have come back to the land of Israel, which means that the Jewish people are able to bring this fertility to the land, which is not, it can't be brought by other people. Right? There are other peoples that were living here over the generations, over the last 2,000 years. Empires have come and empires have gone, and nothing happened at all. The Jews came back, and all of a sudden the land starts to produce. My rabbi once told me a beautiful little story. He said he was talking to a professor of meteorology, and from Israel, a completely non-orthodox fellow, and the professor, not my rabbi, and he said that he was describing that Israel is truly an interesting place. It falls in between different meteorological zones, and he says truly every drop of rain that falls over here, he says it shouldn't get any rain at all because it sort of falls in the cracks. And he said every drop of rain that falls over here is a miracle. So my rabbi looked at him and raised an eyebrow, and he said, this fellow looked back at him, he says, no, he says, I don't mean a miracle the way that you mean a miracle. He says, I just mean it shouldn't happen, that's all. whatever. Everyone gets to see whatever they want to see. They get to understand whatever they want to understand. What's fascinating is that even meteorologically, right, we're talking about a land which is not blessed with obvious physical commodities that are going to make life more comfortable over here. And it's something that we have to work on, right? Even down to the rain. So we pray for rain. We pray very hard over here that there should be rain and we should have a nice wet winter season, which is normally very short but very powerful. Right? Like I said last year, unfortunately it wasn't, but maybe this year, if you people pray a little bit harder, and maybe it will. It's up to you. Right? So says HaKadosh Baruch Hu like this, verse number 3, Vayalachem pas negev mimidbar tzin ad yidei Edom. So where are we going? From the south, we're going from the wilderness of Tzin, al yidei Edom, right, in the land of Edom. Vayalachem gvul negev miktzei yam hamelach kedma. And that's going to be the one gvul, one border is going to be from the edge of the Dead Sea. Yam hamelach. Right? Which I read not very long ago. They're trying to, Yam HaMelach, unfortunately, due to the water issues over here, one of the things that's been very badly hit is the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is receding, I think could it be a meter a year, could it be?
Very possible.
I don't know, it sounded like some rather large amount, actually. And of course, nobody quite knows what the ecological repercussions of that will be, aside from the fact that the Dead Sea is one of the, considered to be one of the most significant wonders of the world. But nevertheless, nobody has a clue what that means if the Dead Sea will disappear. One of the reasons why the Dead Sea is receding is not just to do with the lack of water. In the olden days when there was an ample winter, so the water all the way from the Kinneret, like the overflow would come pouring down into the streams and the rivulets and just ultimately make its way down into the Dead Sea. During the summer, of course, a lot of water was lost to evaporation because it's very, very hot over there. But one of the reasons why there's a problem in the Dead Sea is to do with the Dead Sea industries. They're creating all kinds of cosmetics that are coming out of the Dead Sea. They're supposed to be very good for your complexion, for your skin. Maybe just not so good for the Dead Sea itself. But I read that the United Nations Heritage Trust, which anything that of course is preceded by the words United Nations, we all understand means it's probably not going to happen. The United Nations Heritage Trust would like to build a pipe from the Red Sea all the way across to be able to bring water into the Dead Sea. Now, of course, that's a fascinating idea. What color will the water be if it comes from the Red Sea into the Dead Sea? I don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I guess, pun intended. But what is fascinating over here is that there are two, as with anything to do with ecology, there are two very, very vocal opinions. One of them is that this is the only way that the Dead Sea can be saved, and this is the way to do it. And the other one is that if you're pumping in regular seawater from the Red Sea into the Dead Sea, no one's got any idea what that's going to do to the ecological balance over there in the Dead Sea as it is right now, which means that the Dead Sea has got its own, it's got its own ecology, and it's got its own little ecosystem over there. Whatever, I imagine, my feeling is that if the United Nations are involved, then probably whatever they do will be the wrong thing, I imagine. ונוסף לכם הגבול מנגב למעלה עקרבים ועבר צינה ויתו יצא יסוף מנגב לקדש בניה. It's going south from Male Akrabim and it's going towards Tzin. ויוצא חצה הדור ועבר עצמונה. ונוסף הגבול מעצמון נחלה מצרים. So here's some of these things are mentioned over here, right? Atzmon, Kadesh, Banea, Male Akrem, we're talking about down south. Right? Interestingly enough, that the modern day borders of the state of Israel they go down much further than the biblical borders of the state of Israel, because the modern day borders of the state of Israel go all the way down to Eilat. Right? Now Eilat doesn't appear inside of the biblical borders. The Sinai Desert, of course, which at some point did belong to Israel and was given back by Menachem Begin to the Egyptians as part of a peace treaty that was also part of the state of Israel at some point, but it wasn't part of the biblical borders of the land of Israel. וגבול ים, והיה לכם הים הגדול, וגבול זה יהיה לכם גבול ים. The Yam HaGadol is a Mediterranean. Right? So the Great Sea, which means that the border on the left-hand side of the state of Israel is reasonably easy to define because it's a sea. Of course, interestingly enough, there have been, as far as I know, very, very few problems with defining international waters and which part of the water belongs to Israel and which part of the water doesn't belong to Israel up until very recently, right? And once they found natural gas, enormous natural gas deposits in the sea off the land of Israel, all of a sudden everybody's been claiming it belongs to them, right? So Lebanon says it says, Crete says it belongs to them, Turkey says it belongs to them. It's an amazing thing. Like nobody wants something until you realize there's something valuable there, and then all of a sudden everybody's going to start fighting over it. It's not so posh. It really isn't. I read an interesting article that said that they found these fields, these gas fields, which have got trillions of cubic, whatever it is, gas deposits in there, which in Mitzvah Hashem they'll start taking out, and it will start supplying gas not just to Israel, but to be able to export gas as well, which is supposed to be the most enormous source of revenue for the state of Israel, and it should make things a lot easier for everyone living over here. However, what they say now is that a significant portion of the profits that are going to come out of these fields are going to have to be put back into security. Because not only do they have to try to secure the land of Israel, but now they're going to have to secure the water around there as well, and these enormous rigs that are put up in order to be able to get the gas out of there. All of these things are going to be very vulnerable, and they're going to require security of some kind, which is sometimes I wonder, it's like, so where's Hor HaHar? Right up at the top. However, again, don't be confused by the map on the side of on the map on the side there are two Hor HaHars. There's two mountains of Hor. Why is that? Because again, we've got two different opinions about where the borders go. Which means that it's very clear from the verse that the border ends in a place called Hor. Right? Hor HaHar. However, the question over here is, where is that exactly? Is it further down or further up? So according to one opinion, it's further up, and that's why you've got the lines going up to the top of the page, to the top of the map. And the other one, it's a little bit further down, which is why you see it over there. It's not that there are two Hor HaHars. Mehor HaHar tito lavoi Hamas. And from Hor HaHar, you're going to go to a place called Hamas. Right? However, Hamas, the terrorist organization, is spelled with a samach. Hamat over here is spelled with a taf. Vayu totzoit hagvul tzdoda. So where is Hamat? Over there towards the top. Vayor hagvul mishafa harivlo mikedem la'ayim. Vayor hagvul umachar al ketef yam Kinneret kedma. It's coming down to the Kinneret. Now, are you familiar with the land of Israel? Yeah, you're familiar with the way the land of Israel looks. The Kinneret is one of the most important places in the land of Israel because of the water, right? Most of the water that's supplied up to, I think, almost Tel Aviv is coming from the Kinneret. Right? In the Tel Aviv area, they have aquifers that get filled up with the rains, and that's supplying the water over there. Over here in Yerushalayim, if my memory serves me correct, the water does not come from the Kinneret. Right? But the Kinneret is something of tremendous strategic value. It really is, right? I mean, so we're talking about water now. Water is a very important commodity. It's a very scarce commodity in the Middle East in general. It's been the source of lots of friction over the years. Syria, Lebanon, all lay claim to the rivers that go into the Kinneret. At one point, many, many years ago, Syria tried to build a dam to block off the water that was coming down into the Kinneret. The Israelis took care of that. That was the end of that. But it's something which, water, the more people that come to live in this Middle Eastern area over here, the less water there's going to be, the more of an issue water is going to be. It's as simple as that, right? What we have to do is that we have to pray, like I mentioned before. Now, I always tell this over because it's something which is truly astonishing. It really is. They have something in the Kinneret called the red line. The red line is a line where if the water goes below that red line, it's going to completely mess up the ecosystem that exists inside of the Kinneret itself. And they really are very, very concerned about what that means. Right? It means, first of all, it means that they won't be able to pump any more water out of there. And secondly, it might make irreversible damage, which will be, again, nobody really understands until these things happen. No one really understands what that means. Right now, the Kinneret, here, this is Israel. They have a very innovative way of dealing with the problem. Right? This red line, when the water gets too close to the red line, they just lower it. And then all of a sudden there's more water in the Kinneret than they thought there was, and everything is okay until they have to do it again. However, I remember, maybe 10 years ago, there were 3 very bad winters where there was hardly any rain at all, and the Kinneret was very low, and it was announced, the meteorologists announced that unless there were 3 rainy seasons in a row, one year after the other, there was no way that the Kinneret could possibly fill itself up again, and there was an awful lot of concern. And in that 1 year, the most enormous amount of rain fell. It was something absolutely extraordinary. They can't remember the last time that it ever happened. In the history of taking statistics for these things, and the water filled up. The Kinneret filled up. It was something incredible. It got to the point where they were debating whether to open the sluice gates in order to stop it from flooding. Right? Open the sluice gates, that water's going to waste because it's not really being directed into anything. And after Purim and before Pesach, I took my family. We drove up there just to see this spectacle. It was something incredible. It was, because for years and years it had been pretty dry. So trees had started growing, and the entrepreneurs had set up little sort of like kiosk stations all over the place. And when you went up to see what was going on, what you saw were the tops of metal umbrellas sticking out of the water and the tops of trees as well. Didn't occur to anybody that the water would fill up the way that it did. The Kinneret is a very, very important strategic point inside of Israel, and we need to daven. We need to daven when the winter comes amidst Hashem after Sukkot. When we start davening for the rain, we've got to pray very hard that it should be a good, wet, rainy season in order to be able to replenish the water supplies, which are really not doing very well at the moment. So we're going back from the Kinneret down into the Yam HaMelech, into the Dead Sea. ויצב מוישה את בני ישראל לאמור, זוהי הארץ אשר תשנחלו אותה בגורל אשר ציווה השם לעשות לשישה מטות וחצי המטה. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, this is the land we're talking about. And it's going to go to 9.5 different tribes. And again, why 9.5? Because 2.5 tribes are going to the other side of the Jordan. Right, Manasseh is the half. So we've got 9.5 tribes that are left on the Israeli side, on the land of Israel side, 2.5 tribes on the other side of the Jordan River. כי לקחו מטה בני הרובני לבית אבותם ומטה בני הגדי לבית אבותם וחצי מטה מנשה לקחו ונחלתם. Because they've already taken their nachla, they've taken their portion, their section, they've taken it already. Now, why is this being said over here? For those of us that have been following the Parshas as we go along, this has been, how do you say it? Been flogging a dead horse over here. This has been mentioned over and over again. Like, why are we hearing it again one more time? So, according to the Mefarshim, it's a very interesting idea. Moshe Rabbeinu, knowing that when they go into the land of Israel, the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Gad are going to be sorry that they made this deal, is making very sure right now that it's being reinforced again. They've received what they're supposed to receive. What Moshe really is saying is what? Don't let them come into the land of Israel and say, guys, we've changed our minds, and here now we're going to have to realign everything in order to put another 2.5 tribes into the land of Israel. It's not applicable what they're supposed to receive. They've received. It's theirs.